Hello and welcome everybody to another puzzle challenge video with ChessUniversity.com. This is Ryan Murphy presenting the puzzle, and before I actually get into today's intermediate difficulty puzzle, which will be the first of its kind for the week, I want to quickly review yesterday's puzzle and its solution. So if you haven't seen it already, if you haven't tried to solve it on your own, feel free to pause the video here and I'll present the solution. So this one was white to play and win. There's actually two very crushing moves, both of which are completely accepted as answers. The simplest one, which I think most people will see kind of very quickly, is the winning pin move, going after the queen and the king on the same diagonal. This will win black's queen for only a bishop. That's completely winning. There's another fancy way you can go about it, which is to start with queen d4, threatening a checkmate in the corner. And the only way to adequately defend against mate here is queen f6, but white can give a series of checks and eventually either win the queen or force a checkmate against black. So one sample variation goes like this: queen d5 check. If the king steps on the same diagonal as the queen, you could just take the queen with bishop f6 check, which is again completely winning. But the other option is to go like this for black, and same problem. You take here, and the rook is pinned, so you don't actually even lose your bishop. Just to show some cute checkmate variations, if queen g7, first off, you could take the queen, but even cuter is to go check. And now there's two different ways the king can run, which both result in mate. If they go in the corner, we give check. Only move is to take. Check and checkmate. Can I get my bishop? There we go. So we have a very nice mate near the side of the board. And another cute mating pattern, which is nice to see if we back up, is if the king runs the other way, we give a check, and then we have this nice little crisscross checkmate in the center. King is stuck. So both of those moves, both queen d4 threatening the mate, which is really hard to parry and results in you winning the black queen, or just immediately bishop d5, which wins the queen on the spot, those are both good. So hopefully people who tried solving it found one of those answers. Let us now jump back, or I should say jump to introducing our puzzle for the day, which is this guy here. It's white to play and win. The players are Stopa against Wei, and it's played on chess.com as usual in a blitz game. And yeah, just try to find the best move for white. I will do the usual where I go back through the game and show how we got to this position. It was actually a very strong game by black for a very long time. Just at the very end, they kind of fell apart. The players are rated about 2,400 and 1,700 on the site, just for reference. So the game began here. We already have an unusual opening. White trades a bishop for a knight, but doubles the pawns. And both sides go for their favorite development scheme. Knight d2 might be weird to some players, because you're like, well, doesn't the knight usually go on c3? But this is actually a very important point. From c3, the knight is a very sad horse, because it can't go to really any useful squares looking forward. Putting down the rim doesn't really do anything. So yeah, the knight would be just very sad if it was on c3, because it has nowhere to go. Even though it's technically developed, it's actually not very useful. Knight d2 is way more correct, because the knight doesn't block the c-pawn, and also the knight has ways of rerouting to more useful squares down the road. But the important thing is that the knight's supporting this move c4. It's not blocking the pawn. If you block your c-pawn, you can't challenge this pawn in the middle. And if you want to have this bishop be happy someday, you have to challenge the pawns that are blocking it. You got to try to trade them away so that the bishop opens up. So knight d2 is the correct way to develop here. Okay. So f5, knight to f6 was played, and then c4, trying to open up the position. Knight e4 was played, and we get a change of structure like this, where we have sort of an advanced French pawn structure in the center, but with colors reversed, and with white having obviously the fianchettoed bishop, which at the present is a very sad piece. Common plans in this position include going for pressure against this pawn on d5, which is the back of the pawn chain, and thus it's not supported by any other pawn by definition, and so it's kind of weak. So you have ideas of going like this, and then also playing f3 to open the bishop to put pressure on it as well. That is one of the key strategic ideas or plans associated with this type of pawn formation. Another very logical way to play is, because there's only one open file, for white to move their queen and then put the rooks and try to double up and infiltrate. Though I should say that that's usually harder to achieve when the bishops are going to control pretty much all of the infiltration squares. So if black puts their bishops here and here, they're going to basically every square from c5 down to c8 is going to be covered by a minor piece or a pawn. So it's definitely possible and logical to play for the c file. It's very easy to play that plan, but if white wants to get something in terms of like actual threats going, it is more likely that the plan against the d5 pawn is going to be the way to go. Okay. Anyway, queen b3, bishop to e6, knight to c3. Some people might ask, why isn't this a free pawn? And the answer is, it is a pawn you can take. The problem is that just typically in these types of situations, if the b2 pawn's hanging, not protected, rook b8, rook b2 gives pretty good counterplay for black. The active rook is pretty strong. The bishop pair is very strong. Black has ideas of going h5, h4, and creating a counterattack on the king side. And this a pawn's a very, very long way from queening and becoming very dangerous. So, yeah, generally speaking, you don't want to go for this where you allow the active rook. Okay. Anyway, back to the game. Knight c3, queen to a5, getting out of the way of the rook so that they can connect and fight for the c file. Here was a good moment, and also like on the next move and probably the move after that, where white could have considered playing for f3. Now that the queen is away from the king side, if the queen were on d8, you'd have to maybe think about a move like queen g5, although I'm not really sure if that's a huge problem. But here, yeah, after f3, you're blasting open your bishop, and your worst piece becomes active afterwards, so white will have counterplay. So it's definitely worth considering here. Anyway, rook fc1 was played, and now both sides fixate on the c-file. Again, f3 is still interesting here. But again, white's committed to this plan, and black goes for shoving the b-pawn up to b4 and forcing the knight away. Rook c4, it's a nice move by black. Black intends to double on the c-file. And white doesn't want to take, obviously, because after it takes, this queen would have to go back, and we'd have two strong pawns, which is similar to what happens later. Okay, so black doubles, which is a really strong move, very nicely seeing that if bishop takes c4, pawn takes c4, the queen actually has no good square to go to, and so white has to lose material to not lose their queen. In a position like this, basically it's going to be a piece up. So, for example, here, 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 and you might say, wait a second, doesn't that blunder a back ring checkmate? The answer is not quite, because there's bishop f8, very important move. So black does, in fact, emerge with an extra minor piece. Okay, so rook c4 was played instead of bishop c4. Bishop c4 would be losing. This is still very bad and probably also losing, but black still has to work pretty hard. So, right, black achieves this protected pass pawn deep in the white camp. This pawn should be decisive on its own, especially in conjunction with the bishop pair, and, as mentioned earlier, long-term ideas of expanding on the king side to put pressure on white's king. Yeah, so anyway, black goes bishop d7, knight c5, takes. We can't take this pawn as black straight away because that would hang the guy down here. This bishop is not protected, so first the bishop moves, the queen protects the pawn and counterattacks e4, and now we get a trade of these two pawns, and still black has a huge advantage. If black had played the move rook d8 here, intending to infiltrate later down this way, black would have a really big advantage. Of course, they should also make a move like g6 at some point to make sure they never get back rank mated. Yeah, those are ideas that black should have been looking to play. But instead, after bishop d5, queen g4, they played queen c6, which is a really big blunder, giving away this pawn for free. And now white's in the driver's seat because they're up a pawn, and this pawn's actually able to be attacked because it doesn't have a support from another pawn. So white fishes for a queen trade. Black declines it because, I mean, they're down a pawn. They don't want to simplify. They're afraid of just like losing the endgame. But unfortunately, the problem here is that queen g6 is another blunder. Black had to take on f4 pretty much. Maybe retreating the queen back towards e7 would have been okay as well, or even to c6. But keeping white with at least a set of doubled pawns, it's not the greatest, and white has really good winning chances here. But there's some hope. If everything gets transferred, like if you can magically erase the queenside pawns, there's some hope of making a draw, based on the fact that it won't be so trivial for white to create a dangerous passer on the king side, thanks to these doubled pawns. But anyway, after queen g6, like I said at the beginning, it's white to play and win. So hopefully you guys spot it. Check the link in the description if you want to make a comment on the official page on our website. And otherwise, I'll see everyone tomorrow. Thank you for watching.